Hello and what is up YouTube? My name is G3 Iron and today we are talking about jumpstarting your currency at the beginning of a league, and we are going to give you 5 ways to increase your profit in the first roughly 72 to 120 hours of a league launch, roughly the first 3 to 5 days of a league launch. Now, first off, if you're new to the channel, welcome. You can go ahead and like, subscribe, and ding the bell for more videos just like this one. If at any point in time you would like to jump ahead or revisit any of the topics that we discuss, there are timestamps that are placed directly above my slightly balding forehead, and those are hot linked for you down below in the video description. Any other links or particular resources that we mentioned during the video today will also be linked right for you down below in the video description. So let's get jump started today with a disclaimer. First off, every league has an economy reset. Every single league. It's one of the hallmarks. It's one of the reasons why we all come back to play Path of Exile if we've taken a break from playing Path of Exile every roughly 3 to 4 months to come play a fresh economy. Some resets lead to specific methods and strategies being more beneficial than others. This shouldn't be rocket science to anybody. Sometimes there are some things that are worth more than other times. So any specific currency amounts that are referenced during this discussion should be taken as a general principle rather than an exact ratio of cost-benefit processes. For instance, any particular examples that we use about previous leagues and specific prices or specific profit margins that we made, they may not apply for the upcoming Legion League and in the future. So you may just want to take specific prices with a grain of salt, but look rather for the principle that allowed us to make currency with those specific prices. If you would like to get into more of the economic theory side of Path of Exile, we've got 2 great playlists. One of them that is called Bank of Exile and another that is called Principles of Economics, both of which are specifically related to Path of Exile, economics, trading, and making currency in the game. And then, of course, we've got several random videos for your interest, the most popular one being, of course, how one particular player made 3 mirrors in Betrayal League simply through generating trades and by observing the market. So if that's the sort of thing that you're interested in, of course, that'll all be linked down below for you in the video description. So method 1, the first method of our 5 methods for improving your currency generation at the start of the league is simply to rush maps. It is to focus your character in on getting to maps and letting nothing stand in your way. So getting to maps within the first day or 2, the first 24 to 48 hours of a league launch, means that you're able to be a seller of any additional and extra maps that you find. So as you push your atlas and as your character continues to level and as you continue to fill out your atlas, every single map that you're not planning on running then becomes sellable material, and there is no greater time to sell than during the early parts of a league. Maps themselves have a premium value early on during leagues, as the vast majority of players who purchase maps do so in order to bolster their atlas completion percentage at the beginning of a league. So what you should take away from this as a general principle is maps are at their highest value in relationship to the time played in a league. There is a time in which they will go static and their value no longer increases and may even decrease at a certain point. So early on in a league, maps are at a premium value. So rushing maps is a completely viable method, and it's the reason why I wanted to put it number 1 right here, because if you actually want to play the game and interact with the game and make a bunch of currency, rushing to maps is one of the ways to do it. The further you can push in maps and on map progression towards completing your own atlas, the greater trade rewards for you await as your inventory and extra maps essentially become stock for you to then sell and make larger amounts of trades and higher value trades. In other words, higher tier maps that other players need access to in order to complete their particular atlas. So doing things like improving your play speed through the 10-act story campaign, as well as learning different map layouts and learning your build that you chose as your league starter and how it interacts with different map bosses and which map bosses and which map affixes are particularly dangerous for you and costly for you to re-roll. Those are all things to take into consideration as you choose for yourself to rush maps, if that's the method that you choose early on to get your Bank of Exile started at league launch. Now, the second method that we're going to take a look at is discovering the league mechanic. I put this as number 2 because this is a high risk, high reward way to go about making currency early on in a league. Some league mechanics offer massive rewards to players, and the first players to discover the techniques and tricks for farming those particular mechanics can be competitive for a very long time in the market space, or maybe even have a monopoly on a particular market if they discover something that no one else figures out. There are several players in the G3 guild that have taken advantage of this throughout various past leagues, as well as other guilds and, of course, other content creators. One of the things that's really, really interesting to look at and to watch for when a league launches is just how much information actually gets disseminated and figured out by the community and then shared. During Bestiary League, all the way back in spring of 2018, somebody figured out a recipe that was a bestiary recipe, and they were using that bestiary recipe to essentially make several exalted worth of trades on the trades that they had figured out how to do every single day that they were playing all throughout bestiary, and there were only 2 guys that figured out how to do it in a guild of like 4 players. So they got to control that entire market for the entire Bestiary League, and nobody had figured out how to do it. And then at the very end of Bestiary League, they actually came out with a Reddit post, very, very detailed, that said, hey, here is how we went about doing this particular method, and here's how we made the currency that we made. We figured this out relatively early, and we kept a monopoly on it because nobody else figured it out. That's really, really awesome if you can do that, discovering a league mechanic and how to farm it for profit. So knowledge is currency whenever a new mechanic gets introduced in Path of Exile. Knowing how quickly to respawn particular mechanic encounters, such as low-level Delve or Betrayal or even Alva Temples, that can be incredibly profitable for you early league. It means that you're one of the first and maybe only person to farm and trade that highest demand items related to the league, because everybody's excited for a new league mechanic. And so, of course, everybody wants to try it out. With Legion League, of course, that's going to be probably revolving around incubators as well as around Legion jewels, but maybe we'll discover other things as well. Maybe we'll discover the location of new divination cards, for instance. That's always a great thing to discover very early on, and then get the corner on magic finding and farming for div cards in a particular map or tile set. That's a great way to make money early league. The third way to jumpstart your currency at the league start is to target farm masters. Now, this can be less wide-ranging in terms of high risk, high reward. It's generally more stable in terms of the value, but it also tapers off a little bit quicker because there are a lot of players who choose to do it. So each of the new masters, Nico, Alva, Jun, Einhar, and then, of course, Zana as well, but she's not a new master, they all offer unique rewards. So targeting one of these masters is essential for you to cut off and corner your aspect of the market for whatever it is that you'd like to do. So if you target Nico, of course, this allows you to go deep in Delve. Of course, if you just want the prestige of having your name ding up on global notifications that you're the first one to reach certain Delve depths, then targeting Nico is the way to go. If you're doing it for currency purposes, then of course fossils, bossing, and the 6-link recipe are all reasons to target farm Nico and go deep early in a league. Targeting Alva, of course, allows you to reap the benefits of the Temple of Atsuatl, including corruptions, divines, Atsuatl mods, which are unique to Atsuatl himself, as well as currency, which you never know exactly what's going to drop from you in a temple. Sometimes a temple in and of itself is incredibly rewarding in terms of the maps, in terms of the currency that it can potentially drop for you. So targeting Alva can be very, very lucrative, even if you don't have something that you want to corrupt yourself. Simply farming up a temple so that it's got a double corruption temple waiting for it, and then you can sell that to another player. That's another great way to earn currency early on in a league. Targeting Jun, of course, allows you to either sell or unlock crafting along with Betrayal progression. We're talking Scarabs, we're talking Tiny's Trial, we're talking Uniques, we're talking currency drops. It is a great way to make money early on in a league by targeting Jun. One of the things that I've done the last couple of leagues now that Betrayal has come out is actually sell every single veiled item I get, because I know that I'm not going to go for the mastermind fight and for all of the crafting. I've got friends in guild who do that, and I've got other traders that I reliably trade with on a league-by-league basis that I know they'll be able to help me out if there's any crafting that I need to do. So for the vast majority of the game, I take all of my veiled items and simply put them into premium stashes and sell them anywhere between 3 to 15 chaos. It really just depends on what the veiled mod is and what the item is. There's lots of factors that go into that. But if you're going to target Jun, it's a wonderful way to do it, either for yourself to actually unveil things and then provide crafting service for other players, or, of course, to actually sell the veiled items. Say, I don't want to do the crafting. I'll just take the currency now. That's another great way to make currency early on in a league. Einhar allows you, of course, to have a wide variety of single-use crafts, such as currency and items early on, especially within, again, we're talking such a narrowly defined period of time within the first 3 to 5 days of a league. People don't have their bleed flasks. People don't have their freeze flasks. People don't have their instant flasks. So flask farming off of Einhar can be incredibly profitable if you keep finding a bunch of beasts and you're just target farming a bunch of beasts, and you're able to craft those particular flasks quickly and then put them up on market, because they will get purchased very, very quickly, whether they're quality or not, as long as they've got particularly desirable affixes on them. Lastly, Zana, of course, allows you to unlock map mods, which map mods can be incredibly rewarding early on for map density. So if you're playing with any kind of other player, regardless of whether or not it's in your guild or you're simply opening up a public party and you're hosting the mapping party, if you're using Zana and loading her up, it is incredibly beneficial to you to add as much density as possible to a map. And so the more you level up Zana, the more density and the more specialized sorts of target farming you can do on your maps as you are progressing. So Zana is a great way. And of course, completing the Zana mission also eventually gets you to Uber Elder. And so if you're trying to target farm masters and you really want to rush, maybe start farming either Uber Elder or Shaper for completions and selling those completions, Zana is, of course, going to be needed to do that. So target farming Zana is a great way for yourself to make a bunch of currency and get jump-started early on in a league. The fourth method is to farm prophecies. I put this one at 4 because I wasn't sure how many new players would actually get this one or not. So those of you who are new and you're wondering, hey, what's going on with target farming prophecies? What do you mean I can make a profit off of that? That's a great question. Stick around. Let's talk about that for a minute. So silver coins are still something of an enigma to the vast majority of the player base of Path of Exile, not just new players. So if you're new and you're going, I can make money off of silver coins, yes, you can make big time money. Those of you who are veterans and you're going, wait, I always just turn my silver coins into chaos and convert them. One of the reasons why people will trade you chaos for silver coins is because those players aren't just using the silver coins to trade away for other currencies. They're actually using them to farm and to spam prophecies. So despite being introduced to the game now 3 years ago in May of 2016, most players do not leverage the reward of silver coins very well. Most players simply get them and they rot in their stash, or they flip them into chaos early on in a league. And then other players who are acquiring silver coins are the ones who are reaping really, really great benefits. So it's primarily an RNG-based system. I don't want to tell you something and sell you the moon without you knowing the risks. Silver coin spamming is 100% RNG based. That's going to turn many of you off. It's going to turn many players away. That's totally fine. I want you to be aware of that right now. If you're not interested in RNG based farming and RNG based currency progression, then farming prophecies is probably not the way to go for you. That being said, prophecy farming and spamming can be incredibly profitable early league for the uniques, the chains, or area modifying prophecies that later on in the league are very, very common and quite frankly worthless. But early on in a league, they are incredibly, incredibly valuable. One of the things that the guy who made 3 mirrors in Betrayal League did was something akin to farming prophecies, where he was buying and trading up prophecies that he was interacting with. Specifically, monstrous treasure was one of the things that he really took advantage of trading hard for, which was great. And it was a low price at that time for him during Betrayal League. Again, remember our disclaimer, not everything is going to be the same every league. It doesn't mean that monstrous treasure will be worth a ton during Legion. It doesn't mean that it'll be worth any less. We don't know yet what that economy is going to look like. It just means that, hey, there are players who have taken advantage of RNG farming through silver coins and even trading for them, which minimizes RNG, trading for specific prophecies and then just holding on to them and waiting for them to accrue value. That is certainly another way to go about making currency early on in a league based on your silver coin usage or farming prophecies that you may have. Lastly, prophecy farming can actually reward you massively for hitting the RNG slot machine. Yes, it's a slot machine, but let's say, for instance, that you get a 6-link prophecy, or let's say you get Edziri's shield, right? Edziri's reflection prophecy. Like, those are some of the biggest ones. There's others as well. Jeweler's Touch is a great prophecy that's not necessarily that rare, but it's usually worth several chaos early on in the league, usually anywhere between like 20 to 35 C. It just depends on the league and what time it is of the league, what day of the league it is. because prices fluctuate wildly within these first 5 days. Something that's incredibly valuable on day 1, day 2, day 3 may actually really taper off day 4, day 5. So just realize that if you decide to go this route, make sure that you've researched previously historic relevant prophecies, because chances are some of them will still be relevant during Legion League. Some of them may drop off, but some of them probably will be relevant. So make sure that you're aware of what those prophecies are so you don't miss one, and potentially you're in on the market early. All right, our fifth method for making currency early on is playing Bank of Exile. So some call it Hideout Warrior, others call it flipping, others call it Guild Banker. Regardless of what you call it, one of the single most profitable things that you can do in Path of Exile leagues is spend time observing and interacting with the market rather than with monsters. So you can do this in several different ways. One, you can trade currency. You can be a currency flipper. You can flip Exalts, you can flip Divines, you can flip Annulments, you can flip Chaos, Fusings, Alterations. You think it'll happen. We've already got some new currency that's going to be introduced in Path of Exile Legion. We've got incubators that are going to be coming. We already know those are going to be tradable. We also know that there are going to be other tradable aspects of the league when it comes to jewels, right? To the jewels that are going to drop, the Legion jewels specifically that are going to drop, as well as the splinters that are going to drop from the various army generals and from the encounters with monoliths. So these are all going to be things that are going to be flippable, that are going to be tradable. And so you can sit in your hideout and simply watch the ratios and adjust accordingly to make your profits. Secondly, you can also trade items. This is by far the biggest margin I think that's out there on the market consistently league to league, because every single league there are new players, and every single league new players misprice things, missell things. Every single league there are new players who play this game and have no idea the value of a Mirror of Calandra, and it probably drops for them, and then they stop playing the game and they never come back. I've always wondered that. If I ever get a chance to ask Chris Wilson a question personally or interview him, I think that'll be a question that I'll ask him. Just how many Mirrors of Calandra does he think are sitting dead on dead accounts in Standard? He probably wouldn't answer it because it would have to do with dead player counts. But anyway, every single league, there's new players who have no idea how to price things. Does that mean that it's ethical, that you should take advantage of them, that you should price fix, or that you should scam people? No. I'm not saying that. Don't hear what I'm not saying. But what I am saying is as soon as somebody puts something up and lists it for trade, as long as they go through with the trade, they're getting something of benefit, which is a currency and a value that they would like to price that item for, and you're getting something of value, which is the item that you're trading for. So that being said, if you've got superior knowledge, remember how we said way back at the beginning of the video that knowledge early game in Path of Exile leagues is currency. If you've got knowledge that a particular unique is going to go up in value, or that a particular rare is very, very valuable, or that a base item is very, very rare or valuable, or maybe that a map that hasn't been discovered yet, maybe you were one of the ones that discovered that a new divination card drops off of a map, and you see that people are putting that map up for a very, very cheap price. Maybe you go and corner the market on that particular map, and then you own the market for when that information gets released, and you can reap the rewards of it. So trading items is incredibly, incredibly lucrative. There are lots of unethical ways to do it. There are lots of ethical ways to go about it. I will simply say this. I've said this in previous Bank of Exile videos, and I'll say it again. If a player puts something up for a particular price, you as a buyer have no idea if it's because they're a new player or if it's because maybe they're a veteran player and they simply would like the currency immediately rather than sitting on the item for it to sell at max value. You have no idea if that's the case. So one of the things that I like to do, just to clear that up, is if I'm not in a real big hurry or if I'm not necessarily rushing to make my next trade, I'll ask the player after completing the trade, hey, do you know the value of this item? Hey, how long have you been playing Path of Exile? Those are oftentimes two questions that I will ask. When I ask the value question, a lot of the time people go, oh, was it worth more than that? Or they'll say, yeah, I know, but I just need the currency now. Oftentimes when I ask them if they're new to Path of Exile, they'll say, yes, I just started this particular league, in which case I'll generally tip them a few extra chaos or a few extra of whatever the particular currency was, just to say, hey, you're a new player. Welcome to Rayclass. Thank you so much for this trade. This trade is worth this much more to me, and so thank you for making this trade. I'm still going to go make a profit off of it, but I'd like you to be more aware as a player as you're interacting in Rayclass. So there's opportunities, believe it or not, every single day playing Path of Exile. There's opportunities to meet people, make friends, and help other players in Rayclass. Believe it or not, that's actually an opportunity that's out there. I know that's foreign concept to many of you, but yes, you can play Path of Exile socially and enjoy your experience. So you can trade currency, you can trade items. We talked about ethics. You can also trade services. Whether that's a crafting service, like I talked about earlier, unlocking Jun and then using Jun as a mechanism for selling crafting services for the duration of a league. Or maybe you'd like to sell a service like a bossing service. Maybe you have got a particular build that has just got Etziri on lockdown early or Izaro on lockdown early and you'd like to farm the Labyrinth. Or maybe you've got a build that goes all the way up to Shaper or Uber Elder and so you'd like to offer that as a service. Maybe you've got a build that goes really deep in Delves and you'd like to take out Delve bosses. Whatever that is, maybe it's Legion bosses, which for sure will have something to do with the Challenge League, right? So maybe you'll sell challenges for killing Legion bosses, Legion generals. Maybe it'll be selling a service for taking on the 5 armies at the same time that will be coming out with Path of Exile Legion League. So all that being said, that's an opportunity for you to create currency, again, by playing the game. Most of the time, Bank of Exile is you staying in your hideout. But a lot of the time, what these bossing players will do is they will actually watch global and trade chat, and they'll be watching for players who need help either killing a boss on a particular map or are simply looking for a lab carry or are simply looking for particular completions. And they'll actually offer themselves as a service to those players. Lastly, of course, you can offer banking services. Now, this is an entirely separate category unto itself, and so we're actually going to talk about that here in a bonus method. Oh, like blow your mind. 5 ways to make currency? No, there's a 6th way to make currency. So the 6th and most important way, which those of you that have stuck around long enough deserve to hear this. Some of you may already know this because you're G3 guildies. Some of you won't know this. Some of you will claim you knew this, but you've never done this before. So there is such a thing as aggregating your currency together and essentially having a guild hedge fund. Think about it this way. Playing a build in Path of Exile, which can clear 4 zones in 1 hour, will, all other things being equal, generate less currency than a build which can clear 8 zones in 1 hour, right? Faster builds that can quickly produce results in more currency than average or slower than average builds, right? Playing faster gets you more stuff than playing slower. That's the general principle. We're not doing any rocket science here, right? You're still with me? Okay. You can apply this exact same principle to guild currency sharing. So one player using any of the previous 5 methods, sure, it can be a good currency start. It can be a good way to start your league in Path of Exile Legion. But maybe you and 3 other buddies, maybe you and 15 other buddies, maybe you and 40 other buddies all get together and you pool your currency. Now we're talking some serious market share as well as some serious market disruption that you and your guild can create. Some of you are going to be screaming at me, "Oh, but Iron, I don't have any friends and I don't like to play Path of Exile with other people. I want to play by myself." That's fine. That's fine. I am not making a judgment statement here saying that you should do this or you should do that. What I'm saying is that this is one of the ways that some players make tons and tons of currency. And by the way, this isn't just individuals making currency. This is whole guilds that are paying for very, very massively expensive builds. This is how big time teams that push for very, very lofty achievements and lofty goals early on in the first week of Path of Exile, oftentimes they all get geared out very, very early on in a league. It's because they are approaching the game in a guild hedge fund sense, where they pool currency together towards a joint goal, which means much higher values in the total of currency that you've got to use in the market than simply restricting yourself to solo play. So you can choose to play with a designated guild banker or seller, which saves everyone else the time of trading. Imagine this for a moment. Think, every single time you need to go and buy a map or sell a map, that's time that you are not actually progressing and killing monsters, right? And early on, in the first 72 to 128 hours or so, the first 3 to 5 days of the league, every single minute that you can be killing things in terms of making currency matters, right? Because the currency and the economics of a new league fluctuates so wildly in the first 3 to 5 days. So if you can save any time of you traveling to your own hideout or waiting for somebody to come to your hideout or you traveling to someone else's hideout to make a trade, that's time that is well spent. It's efficient usage of time. using a guild hedge fund manager, essentially. And so it allows for a guild to break into markets that would otherwise be unachievable. That's a typo there, but would be otherwise be unachievable for the individual. The individual oftentimes can't break into these markets unless they simply hit the jackpot and get incredibly lucky. Oftentimes what you will have in these guild hedge fund situations is you will have a banker and a buyer. So you will have a player whose dedicated role is simply to sit in their hideout and sell things. And the guild stash and the private stash of that player are both often frequently used, because what guildies will do is they will go and farm and drop things in the guild stash rather than coming back into somebody's hideout and trading them. They will go drop things into the guild stash. Sometimes if you've got 5 or less players that are actually farming, which would make a total party of 6, then that's great. You can simply come to their hideout and run a quick trade. That's great. But any time that you can save is good time. That's worth it. Then you've got a guild buyer whose designated job is to then go out and acquire things from other players. And so that way it's essentially an assembly line in terms of efficiency. You've got one person who's buying, the person who's selling actually is holding on to currency and is giving that currency back over to the buyer to go out and acquire new items and to break into new markets. And then you've got your third group of players who are actually the ones going out and farming and are dumping things either in the guild stash or they are dumping it through trade to the seller. I have seen one scenario where they added on a fourth role, which was just the designated trade person, in terms of trading between the players coming out of maps and the player interacting in the bank. I think that's going way over the top. I think that's a ton of people. That requires 3 people to be dedicated just sitting in their hideout. So we're talking about, if at minimum, if you're talking about a maximum number of people running around and farming with max magic find and party find and XP grind in a single map for everybody to be all together, that means you need at least 8 people, right? Because you've got 5 people going into the map and then you got 3 people sitting inside your hideout. That's a lot of people. Not every guild has got 8 active members that all can be online at the same time and be dedicated like that. That's oftentimes why we're talking pro streamers, pro gamers, folks who have just been able to dedicate a week long to playing Path of Exile and getting all of their gear and all of their currency that they could want for the league. So I don't want to encourage anybody to go out and do something that's not achievable for them, but I do want to make it very, very clear that this is a way that guilds can actually take advantage of the number of players and the number of resources that are available to them. One very, very specific way that we have done this, I will give you a very, very specific way that we have done this in G3 for several different leagues. I don't imagine that it'll be nearly as profitable this league, and that's one of the reasons why I'm so willing to offer this advice freely and make the information known. I think many of you already know this. We've already posted this several times all over YouTube for us, but nonetheless, I'll address it really quickly here. Oftentimes, we will be one of the first guilds to break into the lore weave market, and that's really, really profitable because early on, lore weaves, typically when we're buying and selling them, we typically buy and sell them for anywhere between 120 chaos all the way up to 250 chaos in value for lore weaves. Oftentimes, we're purchasing unique rings for 1 chaos or less early on in the league. And so when you can purchase 60 rings at 1 chaos, that's 60 chaos that you're purchasing. Then you can turn around and flip and sell a lore weave to an endgame player or to an endgame guild that doesn't want to make all those trades because it's 60 trades that you have to essentially make. Somebody else that doesn't want to make all of those trades, they'll happily pay 120 chaos to all the way up to 250 chaos. I think the highest that we ever sold early game lore weaves for was like 300 chaos, but I think those were just obnoxiously well rolled lore weaves. So one of the reasons why that's pretty reliable is because lore weave is just a solid chest that a lot of different builds use. It may be that lore weave's value goes up during Legion League because so many players are going to be playing melee. It may be that its value actually drops down because, of course, the nerf to max elemental resistances that happened to lore weave last league. So I'm not exactly sure what that market is going to look like. I'm not sure if that's a market that we're going to approach, but that is at least one specific way of saying, look, we did the math. This is how many trades that it takes. This is the profit that it takes. This is the number of players that can get involved. And so we had a bunch of different people inside our guild say, hey, Iron, here's 10 chaos. Hey, Iron, here's 15 chaos. Hey, Iron, here's 2 chaos. And all of that chaos went towards getting rings. And then all of that chaos, once we actually got the rings and sold the actual finished product of the lore weave, all that chaos plus returns went back to each player according to what they contributed towards the guild. It is a wonderful, wonderful way to make currency. It's not in any way, shape, or form advisable with someone who you don't trust. Okay, and I'm not even saying that you should trust me, by the way. I'm not using myself as a hallmark of the community that you should trust. You really shouldn't trust many people in Path of Exile. You really shouldn't, because as soon as you give somebody currency or an item, they can simply remove you from your friends list and scam you. So really the number of people that you would be willing to go in on a guild hedge fund with is relatively few and relatively tight-knit, that you can trust that everything that's going into that is going to be put towards the things that you've asked it to be put towards. But for those of you that are able to do that, you can reap the rewards. And for several different leagues, we did the Lore Weave recipe, made a bunch of bank, and were able to fund several different people's builds, multiple different builds for the duration of the league. It's always great to be able to do that. And I get a kick out of being able to do that by playing the role of the banker. When somebody logs in, or I'm waiting for somebody to log in for the day, and they log in and they're like, hey, how did that flipping go? And you just go to the trade screen and you're like, hey, remember that 10 chaos you gave me yesterday? Here's 100 back, because we took that 10 chaos and we're able to make so many more trades because of your generous contribution of 10 chaos. This is how much more currency we were able to generate because you donated and helped out with the guild hedge fund. So that's a concept for you all. I know that was probably not what you were expecting. Nonetheless, that is the bonus method for the guild hedge fund. Way to make currency during the first 3 to 5 days of Path of Exile. So thank you so much for watching. How are you going to make currency during your league start for Path of Exile Legion League? And what methods do you reliably count on for acquiring currency early league? I think I've been fairly transparent about some of the ways that we make currency here in the G3 Guild. What are some ways that you do? Or maybe what are some tips that you would offer to new players? Maybe to players who are playing on their own, or who are just starting out in a guild, or maybe who are a part of a smaller guild and aren't quite sure exactly how to go about making currency. What sort of tips would you leave for them as they are early on playing Path of Exile Legion League? Thanks so much for your comments and for your discussion. I always enjoy interacting with each of your comments, each of your suggestions, and pieces of feedback. So thanks so much for those in advance. Thanks again, and shout out to all of our Patreon supporters over the last month. I'm really excited for this upcoming Path of Exile Legion League and for hosting more discussions and videos just like this one. I hope that 3.7 Legion League is indeed the league where a Mirror of Calandra drops for you. Boy, that would serve pretty much great. That would solve all of the early currency league problems, right?
Nice patrons, yes, good patrons. They're so kind and supportive.
I can't believe you watched that thing. That was good job. You did it. You got through the whole video. Yay.